Hello, travelers. Welcome to Fulbright Week at Reach the World. For over 20 years, Reach the World has used virtual exchange to inspire youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens. This week, we're proud to celebrate our longstanding partnership with the Fulbright program. Fulbright travelers work tirelessly to foster mutual understanding between the people of the United States and other nations. Under normal circumstances, Fulbright travelers share those experiences abroad with K-12 students in the US through Reach the World virtual exchanges and school visits. This week, however, we're bringing their stories and the world directly into your homes. You can find a complete listing of Fulbright Week live stream events and much more at athome.reachtheworld.org. It's my pleasure today to welcome Fulbright Scholar Jeffrey Thiele. Jeffrey is calling from San Salvador, El Salvador, where he lives. I'll let Jeffrey tell you all about how he came to live in El Salvador in just a minute. But first, I want to remind you that Jeffrey did an amazing job of sharing his experiences, at least during his Fulbright grant in El Salvador, through a Reach the World virtual exchange. And you can find that exchange, you can join that journey and find that exchange anytime using the link in the YouTube chat bar on the right-hand side of your screen. So I encourage you to go check out his articles. They're wonderful. To our live stream viewers, please use the YouTube chat bar to let us know you're here today. And that's also how you can share any questions you have for Jeffrey today. We have a student on camera today who's going to be joining us live and asking her questions. And we'll also pull in questions from the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Very excited to have you all with us. And without further delay, Jeffrey, it's always great to see you. Welcome back to Reach the World.
Hi, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
You bet. Good to see you. What do you want to talk about today?
I can just kind of introduce myself quickly regarding how I got to come to El Salvador and a little bit of the journey and whatnot and why I've stayed, basically. So I was a Fulbright Scholar about a year, and well, time is kind of a weird thing now, about a year and a half ago, and or I started a year and a half ago, and I was doing a human rights grant because before that I had had a chance to go study in London, studied philosophy, and before that I was studied biomedical engineering at University of Michigan, and like all of this, I was also studying a bit of music and all of this kind of like combined into the Fulbright grant that I was hoping to turn into like a social rights and political career and all these things. But then after having come to El Salvador, I was working at this human rights organization, an NGO, and I did my Fulbright project. I was working with internal displacement in El Salvador, which is an issue basically regarding the higher levels of violence, people getting displaced due to multiple different types of violence. And I was studying healthcare access. A lot of my stuff is focused around healthcare. But meanwhile, while I was doing the project, I encountered a musical group, a pop funk band called Canelo. Because I brought my saxophone along with me, basically, because before that I had rediscovered music in London. And before that, I dropped out of school of music. So like I was kind of like on the circular journey to rediscover music in a certain way. But basically this band wanted me to join because they liked my sound. And, throughout the Fulbright grant, I also, in my extra time, I practiced with them. I actually got to go to Guatemala and play at a music festival, played multiple local shows. I started a jazz project here. Started a DJ saxophone duo. I worked on my own music, did a bunch of other collaborations, and ended up falling in love with the arts and music scene here. And after finishing the grant, I decided to kind of take the riskier route. Not really, I don't know if it's a risky route or not, but like the route that seemed more right to me, and become an artist, professionally. And start really working towards a professional level with art and music, and stay here in El Salvador because El Salvador is giving me that chance to do so. And I'm still here today. I've been managing to pay all the bills with arts and music and modeling and whatnot. And, El Salvador's been good to me as far as the art scene goes. Obviously, the coronavirus has put a lot of those things on hold, but as has with many of the world. So I don't know if that's a good introduction.
Awesome.
Or
Yeah, great introduction. I know you have some photos you want to share with us from your time in El Salvador so far. Would you want to screen share those?
Sure. Yeah. Let me just open those up. And yeah, we're on the way. Can you open up the screen share here? And okay. I remember how to share desktop. Okay, can you see my screen?
Let's see here. Yes, looks good.
Okay, cool. How much time do I have approximately to share these slides?
Why don't you take like 10 minutes?
Okay, cool. 10 minutes. I'll set a timer. Okay, so yeah, the timer is necessary, right? But let's see. So I can't share everything about El Salvador, right? Because there are a lot of these, the nature of living in El Salvador is you get to experience a bunch of cool things, and I wish I could share all of them, but that would turn into like a couple of hours of presentation. So I'm basically going to talk about volcanoes and music, those two topics. So just a little introduction with El Salvador. It's in El Salvador has a line of volcanoes that goes along. If you look at all the volcanoes in El Salvador, they kind of all follow the same line from west to east. Basically, it's not exactly west to east, but it's like the left side of the country to the right side of the country. And some of these volcanoes are active, some of them are more dormant. El Salvador, like the metropolitan area of San Salvador, is actually sandwiched between two volcanoes. I'm not really sure who thought of that when they were planning way back when, but regardless, so the volcano on the right side is Volcano Ilopango, and which is basically, this just looks like a lake, but it's actually what they call a super volcano.
Hey Jeffrey, can you click on that slide so it's
sorry,
big one? There we go. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is not Ilopango. This is Santa Ana. The idea is basically Volcano Ilopango is the one on the right side that if it explodes, like all of Central America and or if it erupts, all of Central America and Mexico and South America will be covered in ash. And then on the left side is San Salvador volcano, which I'll get to. What you see here is a picture taken from a volcano called Santa Ana volcano, looking at volcano Izalco. And Izalco is the volcano, like the more like, I guess like the pointed one. And that volcano used to be called the Lighthouse of the Pacific, because it was used to be really active for a really long time, and so active that like people sailing in the Pacific Ocean would use it basically as like as a lighthouse, as a point of reference. And the funny thing is that like there's when you start to learn two languages, like the English and Spanish words you've come to forget them, but like it's called Cerro Verde, which is like they think it's a volcano, but it's really not that active a volcano. But this thing on the left side that you see is basically just a green covered area that is high up in elevation. And a little history behind that. The upper class in El Salvador wanted to use that, like they wanted to build a restaurant there to be able to like look at Volcano Izalco as a spectacular thing. But as the bad luck goes, and basically historically El Salvador has been really unjust as a society, and I like to think that karma is a thing. And basically these people who are trying to build a restaurant to look at Volcano Izalco, who are of the upper class in El Salvador, kept trying to build this restaurant, but like it kept falling down and kept like the plans kept falling through. And eventually when they got to build the restaurant, finally, Volcano Izalco stopped erupting. So their plans were for nothing. And I was like, well, karma. But anyways, sorry, that's a fun little anecdote. But this is the top of, the picture on the upper right is the Santa Ana volcano, the crater. And you'll see down below, basically that's really, really hot water. It's at nearly boiling. It's not just water, obviously. It's I'm not a geologist, but I know it's not just water there. It's very high sulfur content. But the ridges you see in that crater are from one of the eruptions. People used to actually go down into the crater, and they used to get closer to the crater. But eventually, all of that stuff kind of fell down, and now people don't go. You could technically go if you wanted to, but you'd have to skip. I don't know. They have police up there, and you have to like go around the police, and it's really not a good idea because you could also fall in. The bottom right is the Lago Coatepeque, which is actually the lake underneath, or you can see that lake from Santa Ana Volcano. And it's actually a really nice lake. There's an island in the middle of it. It's an old volcano crater. There's a myth. Basically, the Coatepeque means serpent in Nahua, which is the native language of El Salvador. And it's basically like the equivalent of the Loch Ness Monster. So there's a myth that there's a serpent in the Lago Coatepeque. But there's also, the thing is, because it's a volcano crater, it's not just a still water. Like there are really weird currents that happen, or that are in this Lago Coatepeque. And you actually have to be really careful when you're swimming in the lake, because some people have drowned just because of the weird currents and whatnot, but people know and tell you like where to swim and not. And it's really nice because it's really refreshing and whatnot. And then we have on the left side, we have the El Boquerón, which is the crater of the volcano that you can see from San Salvador on the left side. It's not Ilopango. And that actually also used to be a lake, like Lago Coatepeque, but it erupted, I think sometime in the 19th century. And actually caused a huge earthquake in San Salvador and Santa Tecla. But the tiny crater, El Boqueroncito, because in Spanish, especially in El Salvador, they use the diminutive form, putting a cito on because it looks like a tiny little boqueron, which is the mouth, like the tiny mouth. And I've actually, you can get down to that Boqueroncito. I tried to do it with a friend one day. But you technically need a guide, and we didn't use a guide, and it was getting dark, and we encountered the wrong path, and it was just not a good idea. But also it's really deceptive. That Boqueroncito is like actually pretty big once you're down there. So I don't know, perspective is an issue, is an important thing to consider with this crater. That's El Boquerón. That's the volcano that you can see, which you just saw the inside of the crater. And it actually I don't know if can you see my cursor on the screen? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to trace like the original path. Like the original volcano used to be like up here. And then an eruption long before 19th century caused like a third of the volcano to crash down. So it used to be giant volcano. So this is actually in El Pital, which is not a volcano, but it's the highest point in El Salvador. It's up in the state called the Chalatenango, or department. I don't know. A funny story about this is there's a giant rock that looks like it could be an asteroid or just a rock. There's a myth. I don't know. There's a debate as to what it actually is, but you have to like cross this fallen tree that's like fallen over a crevice that's 70 meters deep. And you cross it on like these really, really loose cables. I don't know. It's kind of really not safe, but I was like, why not do it? Like, why not do it? You have to. So I crossed it over, like terrifying my parents because they were here visiting. But like that view, you can actually see Honduras. So that behind me on the left side is Honduras. But it's really terrifying. I got like really bad vertigo because it's so high up that like you kind of like you get disoriented. On the right side, that's Chalatenango. Chalatenango actually reminds me a lot of Michigan because of the way it looks. It's a lot more different than what the rest of the country in El Salvador is. Music, I have like a minute and a half to talk about this. Sorry, I tend to go on. But this is me in San Vicente. I was actually just kind of playing in the Central Park, and the student came along who had a saxophone, and we just did an impromptu lesson. Like I taught her a jazz standard, and it was great. San Vicente is really cool. It's a really culturally interesting place because a lot of really good musicians and artists have come out of San Vicente. And it's just interesting because it's like energetically produces a lot of musicians. On the right is is where I've started jazz nights in a cafe. I've helped start a weekly jazz night, and then that's where my jazz band was born, actually, called Buxo and Luis. And the trumpeter on the left is Pipe. He's one of our good friends. He's the guy who introduced me to Camelo, the band. So you could say he started the whole musical journey in El Salvador. This is Camelo, actually, the band that I mentioned earlier. This is us on tour in Mexico on the top. So basically we went on tour in Mexico for the first time in November, and it was an absolutely amazing time. Bottom right is us eating elote locos, which is like a crazy corn, and it's a fun thing that people eat all the time in like these events, like I don't know. It's a festival called Consuma, where we were playing, and we had elote locos that night. And then Viva Mexico Cabronas is just a really cool restaurant, all women led, in Mexico that we went to. This is my jazz band playing at a new park that just opened up. It had rained, so everyone had to go under the roofed area, but it was also happily a good coincidence, right, that we were playing jazz. This is the saxophone DJ duo. I like it because like the Salvadoran music scene is kind of full of like really machista, macho people, and it's really fun to like be able to play and produce music with a woman producer. And this is again us, and I'm also a model, and in this middle picture, like I got to go to like this award ceremony and in like a suit skirt kind of thing, and it was really cool. There's also like pushing forward like gender boundaries and stuff, and I don't know. That's it. Sorry, got through it just a minute late.
Yeah, no, Jeffrey, that was great. I love the perspective on the volcanoes, and then that the connection to you and your music, and the way music has really like made you stay in El Salvador. It is such a fascinating story. We have a bunch of questions from students that I want to get to. I have a bunch of questions too, but I want to get to our students first. And Lydia, if you're ready to go, I'm going to unmute you, and you can go ahead and ask your question to Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, first of all. And can you say more about human rights and Maya people in El Salvador?
Human rights and Mayan people, you said?
Yeah, human rights and Maya people.
Okay, yeah. So I guess so my research didn't really focus a lot on that, but from what I know and from what the other Fulbright scholars are doing is that basically the native culture in El Salvador is kind of covered up a lot so I don't know, El Salvador doesn't celebrate their native culture as much as what Guatemala or Mexico would, just because I don't know, like there's been a lot of racism and classism in El Salvador that's caused the previous governments to do like a lot of social cleansing, which obviously isn't good, but they've kind of tried to erase El Salvador's history, native history. But luckily there are still populations of native people, of the Nahuatl people in El Salvador, and they are really trying hard to preserve their native culture. And there are some other Fulbrighters that I can also put you into contact with who know more about the native culture of the Nahuatl people. And yeah, so they're actually really constantly trying to fight for their rights here. But it's hard. Like Nahuatl, like the language is a slowly dying language, and the UCA, one of the local universities, is trying to teach Nahuatl to people to try and keep the language going. Because obviously with the native culture, a lot of what's preserved is preserved through oral tradition. And so basically I have a lot of friends who are trying to listen and document the stories that the native Nahuatl people are talking about. But they also have to know Nahuatl for that too. And yeah, so the human rights situation surrounding the native, I guess like also regarding the native people, the Maya, so it's not just Mayans, but El Salvador is kind of a mix of native cultures, because the Nahuatl people migrated from, or what was central Mexico, which now is like the area around New Mexico in the United States, down to El Salvador. And then there are the Lenca people on the kind of right side of the country. And then there are a bunch of mix of other native peoples, and El Salvador is this interesting conglomeration of different native cultures. despite all of that, it's hard to connect to it because a lot of people don't know a lot of things because, one, the La Conquista, like the Spaniards coming in and kind of wiping out native culture there. And it's not long ago, but the governments just recently in the 20th century have done a really, really terrible things towards the native people, which has kind of erased a lot of their culture. So yeah, not great, but I can also connect you more to people who know more about that. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, great question, Lydia. Thank you so much for asking your question today. I'm going to go over to Ms. Wacholtz, who is also with us today and has a question from one of her students.
Cool.
Hi there. So yeah, I'm here with my student, Christina, and she wanted to ask a question. It's kind of a little bit along that vein, and I know you just mentioned a little bit about maybe needing to know more, but I'll let her ask her question and then we'll see how it goes. So Christina, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, can you hear her?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Christina.
Oh, hi. Has Mahab or indigenous culture influenced your music?
Has the indigenous culture influenced my music?
Yeah.
Short answer, no. I actually haven't been able to be in contact a lot with the indigenous culture. What has actually influenced, I've kind of recently been researching Aztec philosophy, and I know obviously the Aztecs weren't living in El Salvador, but it's kind of the common thread of getting in touch with the native culture that was here before, pre-Columbian times. Because I really wanted to find the worth, and because there's a lot of beauty in these cultures, and they're actually culturally they're considered to be less than any of the Eurocentric cultures. But obviously it's not. I think it's just like I had mentioned in the past thing. A lot of people are just trying to erase these cultures because they think it's that their culture is better. But I've actually been able to find a lot of beauty in the philosophy of the Aztecs, which. But that's only because I was able to experience people fighting for the rights of the native culture here, and it talks a lot about I don't know, the Aztecs really find the beauty in how is it I really love how they try and consider life as something that's not necessarily something easy. And they say that the earth is a really slippery earth, that you need to be careful, and you're gonna need to ask for help a lot of the times. And their philosophy is really centered in friends and friendship and connections and social connections, which is comparatively a lot different than Eurocentric philosophy, which is centered in the individual and the mind, based at the mind and how it's perceived by on an individual basis and the free individual. And I think that going back to that, the music, really wouldn't be a lot of what it is without the support from my friends here. And I don't know if there's an intrinsic influence on what, on my friends having descent, but a lot of people are kind of mezclado, what they say, mezclado mestizo, which is they have mix, they have indigenous mix and Euro, their history is kind of split because at some point in their ancestral line, it's not just coming from one place or the other. And maybe it's just the fact that there is a lot more focus on social connections here. And a lot of people are really more open to collaboration and open to connecting with other people. And that for me is kind of music has come to represent the human connection between people. And that is loosely related to, native philosophy in Mexico, which is not the same as El Salvador, but yeah. So sorry, it's a roundabout answer.
Yeah,
but
great. Christina, fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking. As sort of an extension to that question, Jeffrey, I know that you do a lot of jazz, which has roots in the American music scene. But do you see any instruments or music styles on the music scene in El Salvador that either incorporate instruments that are unique to the area or melodies or musical traditions that are unique to El Salvador?
So not necessarily instrument wise. A lot of us play like, piano, saxophone, trumpet, drums, and whatnot. And we're not really connected to that. But I do have a friend who told me that he got this instrument that's kind of like a saxophone from Argentina, and he wanted me to play it, but I still haven't seen it. But regardless, it's from Argentina anyways. But so one music style here that's pretty, not unique necessarily to El Salvador, but it's played a lot. And we have our own kind of version, is cumbia, which has a rhythm like, and that kind of cumbia is kind of like dissed by a lot of like current musicians because they think it's kind of a very like classic, like what you hear at Christmas time, kind of like super traditional Salvadoran thing that people aren't, they're like, why would we ever like want, because like when people think of El Salvador, they think of salsa and cumbia, and they don't want them to think of that. But there's actually one of my friends has a band called Cartas a Felice, and they just released a song it's called El Sopo. I think it's called El Sopo, El Sope. But like it's an electro cumbia. So like they've started to kind of reimagine the idea of cumbia and then put it into their new music. And because cumbia is great. Like, I mean, I love, like, there's a reason a lot of people dance to cumbia because it's got a really cool, like, I don't know, it's a very like front moving or forward beat that makes you kind of want to like kind of just really sit into it. And I think obviously that can be utilized in current music. So, and I've actually thought about trying to incorporate cumbia into some of my music, just because it's really its ability to cause you to make you want to dance, basically, and that's what a lot of music is about. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that sort of gets to Christina's question too. Like the traditional Cumbian music, is starting to seep its way into your musical influences, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We have just a couple minutes left, and I know that you have an instrument you want to show us today, and maybe play us just a little bit of something to take us out.
Sure. So this is a soprano saxophone. It's just I don't know. I've been playing the alto. I've realized that I have only played the alto on Reach World video files. So it's a saxophone like normal, but it's just straight and smaller, and it has a different sound. So I'm gonna just close the windows for a second, just so I don't. Yeah, I can do like another like little improvisation if you want.
Yeah, sure. We've got a couple minutes.
Okay, I'll just do like a minute or two, and then we can, I don't know, just a minute, I guess. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. Take two if you want.
Okay, I'll take two. Actually, one of my friends, his favorite instrument is a soprano, and he's like one of the friends that I play with, Jorge. So hopefully, here goes.
Awesome, fantastic. You have a lot of fans on our live stream who
Oh, cool.
love you for your music and for your stories and are coming back, and you're building a big fan base in the United States as well.
Oh, amazing. I have
Yeah,
music
so
on Spotify as well if you want to check it out.
no, that was awesome and such a great way to sort of wrap up our call today. It's always fantastic connecting with you, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for joining us today from El Salvador and sharing your Fulbright journey and what you've done since then. I think it's so cool that you're connecting with that community through music and staying on and really integrating into that community so well. I want to thank our fantastic live student questions today and thank our entire live stream audience for joining us and going on this journey. There are 3 more chances to participate in Fulbright Week this week. In just a bit, we're going to be talking with Kalina Silverman, who's going to tell us about her Fulbright experience in Singapore and the game that came out of it. And tomorrow, we're going to journey to Estonia and Japan with Fulbright alums Anna Blue and Amal Nanavati. You can find all the details at athome.reachtheworld.org, and we'll see you all then. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Cool, thank you. Thanks for having me.